young guys in the hobby, which is good. He's very knowledgeable, and he also has the best hair in the hobby. So, Oscar, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for everyone for showing up.
Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm sorry. Next year, there's 4 spots open for seminars. So if you feel like you want to do a seminar, get a hold of me, because those spots fill up really fast. And you wouldn't buy it. You got a certain part of your collection or some knowledge in the hobby you wish to share with everybody, do a seminar. You'll find it's real rewarding. I did one many years ago, and nobody came, but it's still fun.
No, it is. I did one on Colorado.
I remember that one.
Yeah, it is fun. You learn. I learned a lot myself by doing
You
one.
did, I remember that.
Yeah.
That's good. So if you decide you want to do one, just catch me and I'll put you down. You got your choice of any of the 4 spots right now, so you're good.
All right. Thanks for everyone for showing up, and I don't know. Hopefully, I'll be able to kind of get some knowledge or give you guys a little bit of insight as to what happens with the chip market, or let's say individual chips when, let's say, 2 racks go up on the market, or 1,000 chips here, or something like that, or let's say those chips get dispersed from person to person. But a large part of it is, in the past year, there's been quite a few number of these, let's say, racks popping up on eBay, and Poker Chip Forum being one of the larger places. Even one larger collector who recently joined the hobby in the last year and a half, who recently started finding these crazy racks.
The billionaire?
Yeah. So that's in the later part, but we'll talk about that. So to begin in, we'll talk about these things to begin with. So I think there's 6 main ones we'll talk about. And these are either, let's say, a rack short of, let's say, 3 chips, a set that's nearly 700 chips, let's see, and 72, and even the Binion's chips, there were thousands or tens of thousands that popped up on eBay, and price got affected by that. So first one we're going to talk about is the Ted's Club chips, TRK small crown chips from California. Don't really see them too often, but there's one guy who has about 700 of them, and he acquired them years ago. Recently just showed them online a couple of months ago. Start as NTV 25s, Royal Nevada 25s, Rancho 25s of the TRK small crowns, black gold, which are these chips that were actually posted on Facebook, and obviously the Binion's horseshoe, the board. So let's get into it. Before that, we'll talk about these. So, plenty of pros and cons when these large finds are being discovered. Most people would maybe think of them as cons, as they're being negative, because let's say if a chip used to be $1,000, it might easily drop to a couple hundred. If, let's say, 1 or 2 racks pops up out of nowhere. So, plenty of pros though. So it kind of gives us an insight as to how many chips are actually out there. If we have information that one collector says there's only 2 known examples, well, it gives us plenty of insight to say there's, let's say, 1 or 200 of them, and they haven't been destroyed like many people say, or maybe they've never been found or somehow lost. Gives us a possible quantity that's still out there and readily available if somebody were to want to purchase one. It gives us the information as to who has them, even if they're behind an alias on, let's say, Poker Chip Forum. It gives us kind of an indication as to where they're located, if they have their actual location. And like I said, information that they haven't been destroyed, and relative market values as far as, like I said, the chip used to be 1,000, it got dropped down to 200 or 300. It gives us an ongoing market value, I guess we could say. As far as cons, the market value will drop, and it will differ quite drastically. Plenty of fear, let's say if somebody did have a chip that they did buy, let's say at 1,000 or 1,200, kind of gives them a fear that their chip value is, I wouldn't say 100% lost, but let's say 50% of it's gone. The one chip that was once rare is no longer rare, even it could be in the hands of a collector that says they're never going to sell them. You never know if they're actually going to sell them, or if they secretly sell them off through, let's say, a private message or something like that. And obvious fear in the hobby, FOMO, people fear of missing out, and along with a bunch of other things. So we'll now get into it. So Ted's Club, the card room, these are TRK chips that were posted on the PCF, otherwise known as Poker Chip Forum by a member. Originally found them 12 years ago at an estate sale. The lady selling them said that her husband used to work there, probably was a dealer or some sort of linkage to that. And at the time when he found them, the chips were selling, let's say, around somewhere around 15 to 20 per chip. Now, I wasn't exactly sure as to what denominations is in the picture, but there's 5 different denominations: 25 percentage ones, 5s, and 10s. And it seems like the fracts were the majority portion as to what was in there. But I do know, like, the 5s and the 10s are the more expensive ones. Obviously, they probably didn't make as many of those compared to the fracts. But more recently, they've been that price went from 15 to 20. Now they're selling for somewhere around 65 to 85 a piece. So this is kind of an indication that, let's say, if a hoard is found, or let's say if these chips were sitting in someone's estate, that the value in this case didn't decrease, but it actually increased. That could be large. Let's say that people have kind of jumped into the hobby, so there's more people who want them, or specifically for TRK like myself, I really like them, so it could be that more collectors are trying to go after them. So yeah, like I said, and the current owner has had them for 11 years now, total of around 688 chips and mixed denominations, so those are pretty cool. And here's the actual order card that's on Chip Guide. So it shows that obviously the cracks were the most ordered chip, I guess we could say. And then the 1s, 5s, and 10s, at least the 5s and the 10s, there's less quantity, but most likely the large portion of the chips currently sit with the current owner, and which would in turn make it harder for people to get an individual one for their collection, which would increase the price. So supply. And that's a main kind of thing about this whole thing about these large finds being found. It's all a game of supply. If there's more supply out there, then the price is going to be lower, but if the demand's higher, then the price is obviously going to be higher. The supply is low. Next one, Stardust NTV chips. So this was another thing that was posted on Facebook last year, and if I remember correctly, yeah, there were 97 of them. So in the span of, let's say, when they left the casino or were sold after the Stardust closed, maybe 3 of them were sold individually. But these specific chips I haven't seen too often, and when they do sell, they're priced well and they go quick. So in this find, there were 97 of them, and like I said, they were posted onto Casino Chip Collectors Facebook group by Craig Bryant. I did a little research. I found in 2008 the chips were selling individually around 50 to 75. So back in the day they were a little bit more expensive, but more recently selling around 24, 25-ish area. So I'm not sure if that had to do with obviously the quantity being found out that there's more of them on the market, so it drove the price down, or it could just be that I'm not sure. People want these chips for their collections, but in this case, I believe it was the hoard got found, so increase, or in turn, the price basically got slashed in half. That could be a large reason as to majority of these chips we see their high values and they drop pretty dramatically. So that's the Stardust. Then there were these Royal Nevadas. And in an old school bracket, we don't see these in this quantity at all, at least from what I've seen. So whole rack of Royal Nevada 25s. They're posted on eBay. Originally, they were listed at $9,000, which would have made it 90% chip. I'm not sure anybody who's going to pay $9,000 for a rack of these, but The price has been reduced down to $2,500, which is, like I said, more reasonable. Although we have to think about that there's more quantity of the chip, and the chip comes out hasn't been seen before. If you're selling something in quantity, you generally want to go under market value. If a chip's listed for, let's say, $19, and you have 2 racks of them, you generally want to sell them either, let's say, 12, 14, even some, well, depends on what the chip is and what the demand of the chip is. But these chips recently have been selling as low as 11, all the way up to $50, and even up to 80 in the last year. So quite a bit of fluctuation, even though this rack itself, I think it's been on eBay for around a year now. Nobody's bought.
But a lot of those are known before that, though, so it's not really new to the hobby.
Correct.
Okay,
But
so
seeing-
there are, most collectors have them already.
Right, but
so.
seeing the whole thing is seeing a rack at least.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah, I've never seen a rack. So,
An old one, years ago.
yeah, I was pretty neat. Then we have these. I think I spoke with you on
Yeah,
the phone.
what are those?
So these El Rancho TRKs. Early TRK that was used at the El Rancho, there were 72 of these found, and similar to the majority of the stuff we talked about so far, they were found at an estate sale, garage sale, or let's say they were sold by some relative of the family that didn't really know what they had. So these were sold around October 21st on eBay for $1,500. The chips, they were generally sold for around $100 for a long time. And after this group was found, so if I understood it correctly, I'm thinking the person who bought these then kind of tried to flip them and started selling them on eBay for $40 buy now, and they just snapped, sold left and right. So in this case, the price dropped even, let's say 50%, or even a little bit more than 50%. So interesting stuff. But yeah, if we take into the account that the chips that used to be sold for around $80, it's a cool looking chip. And it could be a chip that most people haven't had in their collection for a long time, where they wanted the chance to get one. They finally got one. But as far as my knowledge, the supply on these chips hasn't been too crazy, but the demand might have been. So, unfortunately, the price on those dropped. Then we have these. Now this was an interesting one because the Robert Hose, however we say that, he was going through a bunch of old boxes in the house and happened to come across this box. I don't know if it was his box. From my understanding and what I remember, I believe, was it his mother or somebody tried explaining to him that the rack was an investment that his grandpa had made. I'm not sure if this was just for the black gold or what it was, but the chips have basically been sitting in a box and in the house for a long time. He had no idea what they were. So then some person in the comments wrote that the chip rack price was a T, which was $350 to $399, which would have obviously made it a higher end kind of rare chip. And I couldn't find any sold before 2021, which was when they were found. And after that, there were a few sold on eBay for $200 per chip. I think there was probably only 2 or 3 listings. And then there was one listing for 2 chips for $200, which would have been $100 per chip. Now, according to the BC and Will's order card, there were only 400 of these chips made. So seeing one rack like this, or even a partial rack like this, is quite interesting. But again, in this case, the price got slashed in half because more quantity came out. So for what we're seeing, there's a large portion of this stuff, the prices get slashed easily in half if there's a larger quantity found. Now, there could be ways to counteract that, but what I've seen, there's plenty of people who find stuff like this and instantly post a picture, not knowing what they have, and the price just plummets, which makes it good for some collectors who want it, makes it bad for some people that already bought the chip. So then we have this chip, the Binion's horseshoe stuff. So it was July 2020, or a couple months before, there was a bunch of this Binion's horseshoe stuff hitting the the market, on eBay, poker chip forum, all over the place. I'm not sure if it did take everyone by surprise, but I know it took me by surprise. I never knew how much money that this stuff was out there, or even still hiding, let's say, in a safe. But like it said here, I'm not exactly sure as to what the story behind the whole hoard was. I'm sure there's a couple people out there that do know more details about it than I do, but what I remember looking on eBay, I used to go back on eBay every night, look on and on and on. Probably go all the way to page 10 in maybe an hour or two. So there were easily one or two racks selling every week, and there were 1s, 5s, 25s. I remember the 25s being primarily the most sold one, I think. And then there were some listings for the WSOP tournament chips, which are shown here. Those, obviously, there's not as much supply, but the demand on those is very high. So if you have one, or let's say if somebody has a set, it's worth a lot. But the cash chips were selling somewhere around $250. Doesn't seem that the chips before that even sold for much. I remember seeing them, they were somewhere around $8 or $10 a piece for, let's say, the 25s. 5Ks were selling somewhere around, was it 30 or 40 bucks a piece? At one point, 5Ks were selling for as low as 18 bucks a piece after the hoard was found. So easily on those, the price got slashed. But yeah, plenty of people building sets of these or trying to collect the sample sets of the NCVs and tournaments. And they were paying good money. I know there's still people trying to find, I think it's the 1K and 5K tournament chips, and they're asking crazy prices, or even trying to ask people crazy prices. So in that case, the demand is very high, but the supply is extremely low because nobody wants to sell it. So in that case, it's a little bit of a positive. Now, talk about this excitement, the recent stuff that kind of hit the internet, I guess we could say. Now, I don't know a whole bunch as far as information about this stuff. I know there's a lot of speculation and skepticism and all kinds of stuff like that, but we'll talk about it and then we can kind of discuss. So these, if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're not on, let's say, Chipboard, Poker Chip Forum, or Facebook, over the past 2 weeks or let's say a month, there's been a member in the community who found an insane estate acquisition, which he worked on for the past year or so. In the find, you can find chips such as like El Cortez TRKs, the Sands TRKs. There was a rack and one Milton Pearls TRK. Was like a rack with all anything 5s, El Capitan 1s. There was a barrel or something shown, and some other things that haven't been shown yet. But a lot of speculation about the chips. I myself, still am skeptical about them. Just because this stuff doesn't pop up out of nowhere. I mean, you're not supposed to see.
I have a question, it's probably a stupid question, but are you saying that because are they making fakes of stuff like this?
Really? Well, that's skepticism.
Well,
We can discuss after.
yeah, no, I don't, I'm kind of new to the hobby, but I collect coins, and that's why I got out of coins, because there's too many forgeries out
Well,
there.
I'll go ahead and say this. The Sands 5s are supposed to be over 5s There's over a record.
I haven't seen anybody make fakes with the specific spot patterns where it's got where the spots don't go that deep into the chip. But I know there's been speculation on, did Dennis make some of these in a different run much later? Like
Sure.
he just made extra chips later on. Whether or not those would be considered fake or forgeries, who's to say? Because if Dennis is making them, they are still TRKs. Were they used in the casino? No. But is it his formulas? Yes.
So see, in my field, that would be called a fantasy, not a fantasy, a reproduction, basically.
Sure.
Yeah, so it wasn't actually run, but it comes from the same mold.
We call it fantasy.
Right.
But that's just it. If it was the TRK company that made them, it's just it's like a second edition or a second trip run, if you would.
More like a commemorative.
Second print.
So
Second edition.
yeah, it's I can see where the speculation comes from with that regard.
But I guess the main reason, let's say if we're talking about that point, people want to think they have the actual, was it 62 or 65 that this chip came out?
Sure.
If you have one that was made in the 90s, then it's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
I have original ones bought from TRK out of their display cases back in the 80s, late 80s or 90s. There were overruns and the chips were supposedly, oh, maybe the inlays were a little off. Milton Brown's Line 25s are pretty famous for that. They had little threads in the inlay, looking fine. They totally had good quality control, pulled those overrun chips, you know, they had this big molders, overruns, and then they melt them to the casino, some got broken, they'd have some backup chips. They should never have had hundreds of these chips like this, though, extra.
Right,
And that $5 one was only undrilled before this picture of this picture showed up. And so I was at TR King, they just know a lot of stuff. Did you ever get dates that the new owners bought them in 1981? Did anybody ever come up with that transaction?
He keeps posting the 81 or whatever,
Yeah.
79, whatever it is, but
The owners that bought TR King, Glenn and Dennis O'Neill, did they buy it about 81? And so a previous owner, any information on that?
that I didn't look into. I'm not sure if you were.
Others are, we haven't found out who owned it before, or where these really came all from.
Correct.
I thought it was Davies. Was it Davies?
It might have been Davies at that time. But it's something we could look into. So then there's that picture of the Milton Prowls walking school. Now even with that, if we take into consideration, there's a rack and one chip. So pros gives us a little bit of insight as to what chips are out there, possible quantities, who has them, the information that they haven't been destroyed, and obviously the relative market values. Now, I put the pros, but it should be cons. In this case, the market value is going to basically drop dramatically. I mean, if you have a chip that used to be 1,000, and then you see a picture, there's 1,200 or 120 in one picture, chips really not really that much longer rare. And if people wanted to believe that there's only one in the world, no. So yeah, that's the Milton Pros. And here's a little bit more information. So full acquisition is said to be slowly revealed over the next few years. As to what chips are in that acquisition, apart from what I've shown you and talked about, I have no idea. Chris says that he doesn't want to blow his wad all at once. So basically, let the whole world know what's out there. Now, if I were able to find, or if I were to find the same stuff, I'd possibly do the same thing. Obviously, you don't want to go out there and say, I got 120 of this, or 200, 300 of this, because price is going to drop astronomically. In that case, if you were to do it, you'd actually keep the value up a little bit. If you kept it on the down, let's say if you said you showed one buddy, two buddies, you might do it. But if you start showing a thread where there's thousands of people looking at it one day, then the whole world's going to know pretty quickly. Now, in a positive case, I do think it's good for the hobby. It's good for the public to see that the chips are still out there, and they're all together, and they're not gone forever, leaving the chance for other collectors to possibly own the one if they'd like to. Whether they're reproductions or later runs in the 90s or 80s or the actual chips from 62. I've seen others saying that it's bad, but I like to disagree. It's still a game of supply and demand at this point. From my knowledge, the chips aren't going to be sold. As far as what I know, what Chris buys, and he buys to basically hold on to. He's a mega collector. He doesn't want to sell stuff. If he's going to sell something, it's because he has too much of it. At these Sam's chips and stuff, I don't think he has too much of it. Or he doesn't want to let them go away because they're such a nice chip. But I'd like to end off with saying that when chips like this are found or where they're found in quantity, the found effects isn't always negative. Like I showed 2 or 3 times, there's a point where the chip was at a lower price and more found, the price increased because the demand is higher, but then there's like the Binion's chips astronomically decreased. Good example could be the Bourbon Street Fox. I believe they used to sell for $8 or $9 a long time ago. Recently, they've been selling for near $20 for a single chip. And actually, 3 racks of mint condition chips sold the other day for $72.50, which is $24 a chip. Same thing goes with Mace chips. Used to be sold for around $5 or even $300 a rack. Now you maybe get somewhere around $25 to $20 a chip in quantity. because the demand is just so high for them, and the supply is nowhere near the demand. But yeah. So, we can have a discussion or questions.
Oscar, got a question actually. This is more of a question actually for you or the whole room. In specifically the sands chips that we saw. That is what, from the mid-60s?
Yeah.
Okay. So at that time, if I'm not wrong, basically if they were trying to get rid of these chips, the excess chips, they'd either dump them in Lake Mead or bury them in the foundation of a new building. How in the world would somebody in that time period grab all those, and for what reason? Do we have any ideas?
No.
That's what makes me very curious about its authenticity.
Now, I've had a little bit of thought as to the previous owner or the estate, the estate owner, possibly where these chips could have came from. Now, the interesting thing is, most of the chips are TRKs. So you'd expect them, they either like TRK or they have some affiliation with gaming back in the day. Along with that, there was the Holiday Queen 5s, which should have been a totally separate ballgame because it's a different manufacturer. I have no idea as to who the person could be or what they used to do or anything about that.
Probably also taking their life in their hands, knowing that the sands are being run by some very people. At the time, you wouldn't want to be caught digging off with all those chips.
I think the fact that they were found in perfect racks and perfect breakdowns, like Del Cortez is like, so many racks at 50 centers and so many racks of dollars, and it's almost like too perfect. Like, and so if all these racks are perfect racks, because usually when you have overruns, you have like 67 of this or 124 of this. This is like 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. So to me, it makes me feel like this was back inventory that TR King had in stack somewhere, or I don't know. But to me, I don't know. The fact that they were all found in racks of perfect hundreds is kind of telling.
Or did they have backup racks back then?
Not really.
You mean it's, not put out all the chips?
Yeah, they have
I would think
separate
Backup
racks.
racks were real rare back in those days.
That's what I
So
thought.
they made them and they put them, every one of them went out. There weren't anything in storage waiting.
No, they had backup chips, that looked just like the chips were on the table. Backup chips were actually different edge marks and stuff, didn't start until probably 80s.
I knew you'd say that, Joe.
Huh?
I knew you'd say that, Joe.
Yeah.
I agree. Hey,
And just as a point of interest, I was pretty impressed when I saw the first ones with the TR King. But then when he posted the holiday casino chips, and I'll tell you a story about those. Claudine Williams was a friend of mine who owned the Holiday Casino. And the Holiday Queen. I have a picture of her, 8x10, with a shovel in her hand and a wheelbarrow, burying those chips in the foundation of the new casino she was building. And Jean Trimble and I sat down with her one time. This has been when she was still alive years ago. And the first question Jean asked for, I thought of it, was, did you inventory? She said, well, of course we inventory, we had to. I said, what was missing? She said, very few chips. So that's from the horse's mouth, the lady that owned the place.
Oh.
those are showing wear on those, from the picture I saw, those Holiday Queen chips. That's the only chips I've seen them posted show edge mix and wear, but if you look close at those pictures, a lot of very funny pictures. But I won't get
Yes,
all
there
that
are.
right now.
Do you want to look at it? You want to pull the Holiday Queen picture?
Did you, yeah, you didn't show the rack of those, did you?
No, I can pull it up.
Can you zoom in?
Sure.
And maybe some of the other pictures that he posted of all of the racks, where he's talking about not blowing the water.
Somewhere like that.
Yeah, he's slow rolling the community. That's
I
what
mean,
he,
there's tens of thousands in some of those photos.
yeah, he's got plenty more stuff that he wants to show. He's just trying to keep the spotlight on
Yeah.
himself.
I've heard a rumor that he might be here on Saturday. Does anybody know if that's true?
he might be.
Chris Menon.
He is a,
I've never heard of him.
he just got into, he owns a branding company and he's out of Los Angeles.
He must be a new collector. He's
Yeah.
relatively new.
Relatively.
But he's a poker chip collector, not chips like you and I collect, where one of each building collect.
He collects them in quantity. He doesn't do singles.
Right.
He plays poker. He is adept. His money has bought him experiences to play on certain high dollar streams and things like that. But probably all within the past 2 years.
He was on high stakes poker,
Yeah.
playing with Phil Ivey and Daniel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he came from very meager means and has earned himself quite a successful living. So it's not like stuff was just handed to him, but he has found something that he seems to enjoy and has no problem going after it aggressively. I don't know where he's come up with some of the sands and some of the other stuff that he's finding. It's estate sale, okay, fine. Clearly, I have no idea where that stuff actually came from or when it was produced. But just the fact that it looks nice and it's in unused condition was enough for him to aggressively pursue.
Have you heard any rumors about where they possibly could come from? I've heard two names. I know I heard,
I heard Reno.
who?
Reno?
Yeah, no, I heard they were out of Reno.
He said he would reveal the name
Oh,
of
did
where
he?
he got them from, but after he's done, I guess there's still 30,000
Yeah, there's
chips
30,000.
that are still in probate, and so until he's done acquiring all those, he doesn't want to reveal information.
I just honestly hope that he obviously, like you said, I'll say he's new to the hobby. I honestly hope he isn't being taken. You know what I mean? Somebody whose eyes are new to it. I'm sure he has people that he talks to, but I would hate to think that he's spending, God, what, 20,000 or more on this, only to find out that they're worth about a nickel each because they're.
He doesn't care about the work. To him, it's he'll write the check that whatever it takes. He's
Yeah, but they turn out to not really well. I would feel
Again,
really bad for the guy.
I don't.
Okay.
What's in perspective to the guy, Chris? I did some research on him, and he's got a person that part of his company, an employee, whose full-time job is to find Archie comic books. Because he has the biggest collection of Archie comic books. And the ones that are missing, he has this person whose job is to scour the internet trying to find them.
A lot of she doesn't want to run it, and they.
Right, so he's not just, trying to scam the poker.
Right.
He's a collector, he's an eccentric billionaire, and this is his mindset, so a lot different than us.
He's paid 5 figures for fantasy racks. And knowing, full knowing, but he doesn't care. It's just whatever it costs to get them out of somebody's hands, that's what he's paying. So,
Can you zoom in on the inlay and take a look at?
yeah, we're curious about the cross hatching and how that.
Yeah, and somebody sent me some pictures and I wanted to. I shouldn't really get too close. Do you have the El Cortez 25 up there?
Those ones.
There does seem to be some talk about discrepancy in some of the photos, but I mean, who knows? I mean,
I've heard the same thing. Maybe.
well,
One thing's for sure, we may never know the truth of what really happened. And the possibilities are unlimited. It's, talking about those ships that ended up in Reno, real easy to do something like that back in that day. Back in that day, anybody know who Gary Carano was?
Yeah.
Gary Carano, his dad was Don Carano, who built the El Dorado in Reno. Now Carano's owned Caesars Entertainment. And Gary was sent to Las Vegas. They were all athletes, Gary, Glenn, and the other brother, Greg. And Gary was sent to Las Vegas to work under Claudine Williams and learn the gaming business. Entirely possible, just a speculation, Gary Carano could have been practicing, because they made him start at the bottom, dealing. He could have been practicing cutting chips, cutting checks and stuff. He could have taken a rack home with him to do his practice. Could have taken it back to Reno with him, because $5 a chip, $500, even back in those days, wasn't any money to those guys. So, things like that are possible. I mean, I'm not passing judgment one way or the other. I'm just throwing all the possibilities out there of ways things could have got to Reno somewhere like that. Anything's possible.
They also started the garbage business. Right, that's where they got their money, I understand.
Ron was his grandfather.
And years ago, when I
Don was a lawyer. Don Carano.
Okay, the early days in
You
Reno.
guys know who Gino Carano is? She was the MMA fighter. That's Glenn's daughter. Glenn was the backup to Roger Staubach in the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, yeah. Years ago, I got a lot of chips from El Rancho, Vegas. When it burned down, a guy went around and punched a bunch of chips. He was in the salvage business. They sat up in Northern California for years, and I bought buckets of them, small crown, El Rancho Vegas chips.
They
Some were
did that
burned,
anyway.
some were nice. People in the recycle business ended up with stuff like that.
Surf Impossible, it can end up anywhere.
Yeah,
And
that's-
you look at the old Trop first edition TRKs, you know, that there's racks and racks of those out there. How they survived, who knows, maybe someone just grabbed them and they were swapping out for the seconds. No idea, because that would have been late 1950s or 1960s.
I've got a small crown $100 Milton Prawns Aladdin, and I know that this chip is original because it was found. Phil Jensen was there was an article in the paper, they were grinding up the chips in front of the Aladdin, and it got flung out of the grinder, and Phil Jensen gave it to me. So I know mine's real.
The black and white pie? Is it the black and
It's
white
got
pie?
orange
Black-
and white on the black
Yeah,
chip,
yeah, I
yeah.
love that.
That's a story, I tell you that.
It'd be neat if we could find a way to date chip, like, you know, like carbon dating of some sort, you know, sort of spectrometer.
They might drill the chip.
Yeah. Oh, he's got 101. Give him one.
It's used for science.
There you go.
Little clone, that little company called Casino Chip Mark.
But it's fun, it's all gambling, and it's always gonna be mysteries, right? Gambling.
Yep.
One thing to always remember, it's a hobby, collect what you like.
There you
If
go.
you're in it for the investment, you get burned, I don't feel sorry for you.
Exactly.
If you're in it for a hobby because you love it,
Yeah.
then that's fine. Those guys get burnt, that shouldn't happen, because it's a hobby.
But because there is money in it and the things that I collect, unfortunately, guys, the truth is, the longer, once we go, there's going to be more and more. They're gonna get better at making the pops, they're gonna be harder and harder to spot once the market grows. And it's all because of the internet. Like, when you started this, you talked about hoards that are just found. There's been hoards that are found throughout history. It happens all the time, but we're just hearing about it because now the older people are getting into social media, the pictures are popping up. But the truth is, the biggest hoards, they're trading between the rich and the ultra rich, and they just want the attention.
Right.
They don't need your pennies. They don't care if you believe them or not. They really move in very small circles. The richer you get, when you're not, the smaller your circle becomes. And so, I just hope that all of your kids and grandkids are getting interested in it, because some of the stuff that I collect, classic cars, classic motorcycles, the people who are old enough to remember the Model Ts, they're dying off. And so those Model Ts aren't valuable anymore because nobody really remembers them. The cars that are selling a lot now are the cars from the 60s and 70s. They're not cars from
Like
the
baseball cars.
Yeah, so,
Nobody remembers.
yeah, so get your kids in it, get your grandkids interested in it. I love that guy, having a seminar. Share that information. I love that you guys seem to have each other's backs. It's not as cutthroat as some of the other markets, it seems. And, thanks for letting me ask some stupid questions. When you make a rack of chips, you only make a rack, right? No one's gonna buy you don't order a couple of we call it two or a barrel. Because that one picture that 101.
Yeah.
So clearly there were at least two full racks, or you would make it.
Yeah, so what I've seen there's, or even let's say I have one set of chips that probably back in the day the person ordered, let's say 67 chips of this, 54 of this. They didn't have to order.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, I
So
know. That's right.
I'm not sure if there was a minimum,
Yeah.
but as far as I know nowadays, they're ordering tens of thousands of chips at once.
Oh, wow. So clearly, if you're looking to think of the rarity of the chip, you look at how small the casino was, how many tables they had, how long that chip would have been in existence, and you kind of do the math yourself, whether or not, if you take a super popular casino, Binion's was open forever, I'm sure there's thousands of those chips, right? So, because there's no known, like when you buy a motorcycle, I know how many were made. When I buy a car, I know how many were made. There's no records
There
available.
are some records of some chips available.
Yeah.
How accurate they are, I'm not sure, but like when you look at the chip rack, it'll frequently say X amount made.
Okay, right.
For some of those things. You're asking about it when a rack is made, it's just 100.
Yeah.
For casino orders like from Paulson, if a casino orders 35,000 chips, they get 35,000 chips, and they will count it down to the single chip. So if they get extras, they're in the quantities that were specifically ordered. They don't just throw in extras because. If you are a custom set builder and you want something through Sprague's company, then frequently they will include some overrun chips, just because. But that's a completely different scenario.
It's money, it's gotta get accounted for.
Yes, correct.
And someone would overrun a few chips because they would be the notched or drilled sample. The
Right.
gaming commission would hold, the casino would hold, and the manufacturer would hold as their sample.
Yep.
So a lot of times it was just 3 chips.
Right.
Actually, that's all. Supposedly was to be
Are there examples of Paulson and TR King chips that have been counterfeited? I've heard about airbrushed chips being passed at casinos. I've heard of these 1990s chips that got out of TR King that were overruns or whatnot, or maybe late reproductions. But as far as I know, compression molded chips cannot be counterfeited. There are just very few sources of them.
Anything can be counterfeited.
Yeah.
I got a call from another gaming commission 15 years ago. And the guy who was head of that commission said, I understand you know chips. I said, a little bit. He said, I want you to come over and look at something. This was at the Argosy Casino in Kansas City, Missouri. And I went over and looked at them. They were great looking chips, brand new. I said, how did you spot this? He said, 20 of them would fit in the rack. Usually in the rack, they wouldn't. They were made in China. They did a beautiful job. They did a beautiful job counterfeiting them, but they didn't have the compression machine to finish the product. And that's how they caught it.
From a press, it would be difficult, but it's possible but difficult to do. What I've definitely seen examples of is people take a black, solid top hat cane chip,
Yeah.
put in a fake inlay,
Yeah.
paint edge spots, and try to turn those in at the.
Right.
So that's been, but as far as actual pressing chips,
Yeah.
I have not seen that.
I have not seen pressing new chips, but I have seen, this has come in the last 3 or 4 years, where people have actually removed the inlay
Oh, yeah.
from a chip and then had a new, the chip I keep thinking about is the Money Tree 100 and the Mates 100. The exact same colors. And you can just take a X-Acto knife, get under the label of the Money Tree, and peel it right off, and then just have a new label put right over it. And all of a sudden you turn the $15 Money Tree chip into a $200 Mates chip.
The Fremont 25s were a big counterfeit chip years ago. You remember that?
Yeah, that was back in the 50s.
Yeah, they were counterfeited.
I've got one on my table if anyone's.
And then when
Brought the counterfeit one.
And then when Bob Snow opened Main Street Station here, a group of conmen counterfeit Desert Inn chips because everybody would take each other's chips back in those days. So these guys come in and they set it all up because people were really experienced down there at Main Street Station. They were all from northern Nevada and they didn't know what they were doing. And so they set this up that, yeah, we're players, we're coming, we want to play 21, we want to play craps. And they had these DI counterfeit chips that were really pretty easy to tell they were counterfeit. And they were on, a lot of them were on the, this casino, this was City Hall.
Yeah, they were hat and cane and they cut them out,
But-
put them on, that's right.
Main Street Station took them and they got them for about 60,000 in a period of about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And so there's been countless number of counterfeit chips. There's a good thing on YouTube of a team, it's on YouTube, a team here in Vegas that were painting them and doing it. They did a pretty good job, really.
And if they were smart, what the forgers do with coins is they realize that a fake coin out of the press in uncirculated condition is easier to spot under magnifying glasses, so they purposely wear them, right? They'll do that with chips, I'm sure, too. They actually shuffle them, make them look like they were used, make them look like they were circulated, so no one's going to say, well, it looks circulated, so of course it's got to be real. Well, no, someone just sat there and rubbed the shit out of it to make it look like it, and to fool you guys into thinking it was a chip that had been used. So they do that with coins.
When chips are molded and pressed and made, does anybody ever see them? Has everybody ever watched the chip company make chips? Yeah, they'll show you that kind of stuff. Maybe you have, Jim, right? You've seen a few things. I saw TR King set up and had made the chips and the whole process. A friend and I saw that, and I believe what they told us. We're the only ones that are letting in to see that. And then they sold the business, supposedly scrapped the molds, the old hydraulic machines, and all that kind of stuff. But it was a very antiquated way of making chips. And I challenged them and others over the years to see if they would make some phony chips up, and they wouldn't make any. I mean, there were some rare chips where, it was not 100 known to this, but if one showed up, it'd be worth a lot of money. They would not do it.
I wonder how regulated the process is, though. Because if the guy who cleans up the night goes, hey, you know what? I know how to do it, and he just makes it after hours. I mean, like, is there someone working for the state that's watching to make sure that if that company ordered 100 of those chips,
Not
they're
nearly
only
as
100
regulated as
days?
you think. The regulation starts when they make it to the casino.
Really?
The other process, unfortunately, is not nearly as regulated as.
Yeah, because I mean, this is a weird example, but like I have a friend who works in pharmaceuticals, and he's like, do you know how much of this stuff we use to make these pills? They don't regulate how much. So yeah, they make tons of them, the employees sell them on the side in the black market because these companies can't keep track of how much. So I don't know how much, like if every ounce of that mold is, you know, all the paint is counted so that they know that no one's making them. I don't know. I'm being maybe a little facetious, but.
No, I mean, it's reasonable cost.
When the only product is money, there's gonna be a lot of people trying to figure out a way to get that
Yeah.
product. It's just been this way in business forever, ever.
Oscar, I'm curious
And
about.
some people are pretty darn clever.
Oh, yeah.
They really are.
The other thing I wanted to mention too, when it comes to like things that have been repopped or fancy stuff, and my community of collectors, the things that I buy, you might have the best intentions and know full well that what you're buying is a repop, and you say, I'm never gonna sell it, I'm gonna divulge the information if I do, but you might go on into it with an honest intention, but then somehow that's gonna change hands, and the next guy to buy it might not be so honest. So we frown upon fancy stuff, we frown upon repops. Yeah, it looks great, it comes from India, you can hardly tell. I know it's a fake, but it's the next guy. You're gonna take advantage of some naive buyer who doesn't know, and is gonna assume that because you posted it for $500, that it must be real.
When people are doing fantasy chips in like the set builder world and stuff, there's almost always a distinction to visually separate from the original. Either that's enforced by the manufacturer, Scribe, or whoever else is doing that, or even the community itself is like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to pull one over.
Yes, there'll
so
be
so
something.
make sure that there is a distinct visual difference.
Yeah.
To keep it
They're
separate.
getting good though, like in India, they're putting the maker, I collect porcelain signs from gas stations and such, and they're putting all the little manufacturer date, things that we look for on there, they're really good at that. And they chip the edges, and make it look rusty, and they're all over eBay.
Thank you, Oscar. I gotta get back to my table, and we could all talk about this for a month, I think.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Oscar, I'm curious, in your experience and anybody else's here, so let's say a couple racks of a previously rare chip are found, and let's say it's an odd quantity, like 216 or whatever. But you know the person that acquired them and is showing them is not releasing those 200 chips. They acquired them to be used in a home game in a mixed set for something else. Do people consider the value of the chip based off of the 216, or maybe only the 16 that might be released because you know that guy is hanging on to 200? It's not real supply, if you will. What are people's thoughts on that?
I guess in that case, we'd be looking at the 16. If you know the 200 are going to be locked up, they're not going to be available.
See, I disagree. I think the 200, the guy dies, his kids don't care.
Sure.
There's another estate sale that Bush
Long
Madison.
term, they're out there.
It should be an accurate quantity, whether it's circulated or not. I agree.
Well, I'm not trying to say to fudge the quantity, it's just more, when we are buyers or when we are assessing value, are we keeping in mind that there are 216, or are we just thinking, well, if there's only 16, then anybody's actually going to have?
Are you willing to wait till he dies?
Right, and are we going to be aligned when that
Or
happens?
his business goes under and he has to sell everything, or he gets a divorce and he has to sell it because the wife's got half his shit.
We'll put it this way, the Holiday Queen, we had one guy come up to the table today and said that ship's no longer worth 1,200 because there's 2 racks of them out there.
Of course.
It's probably worth a couple hundred because there's the 2 racks. Previously known, there's probably only a couple examples, now there's 200.
So how much can I buy it from you now?
Yeah.
Right. Still 1,200.
I'll give you 150 for it. Okay.
That's out of Microsoft.
Oscar, that was a great presentation. Thank you. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and another one at 3, but the auction is tonight. So, if you
Yes,
don't have
it is.
anything else to do,